I'm really excited about our speaker this evening, who's going to be addressing the threat of Islamic extremism in Africa. Our speaker is a humanist, a skeptic, and a human rights advocate from Nigeria. He is specialized, in addition to Islamic extremism, in campaigning against and documenting the impacts of witchcraft accusations in Western Africa, where many of the population believe in witchcraft with horrifying results. As I was reading about our speaker last night, I was really just kind of struck dumb by what I was seeing. I mean, he's done things for the first time ever, such as conducting the first humanist wedding in Africa. Not in one country, in Africa. In campaigning against witchcraft and accusations of witchcraft, he's faced threats and even physical violence. And I'm really excited to have him here this evening. Please welcome Leo Igwe.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for the introduction. And thank you, friends here at the Humanist community of Central Ohio, for inviting me to speak at this event. This is the fourth time I'm speaking since I arrived here last week. I spoke at the conference of the Secular Students Alliance, and I was so delighted to meet with student activists working to promote secularism on campuses. Then I moved to address friends at the CFI Northeast Ohio, and then to Freethought Durton. Then before coming here, I was told by a friend that Ohio was a very religious state. I don't know how true that is. But I am happy to know that the religious state of Ohio is secular enough to host the office and conferences of the Secular Students Alliance. The activities of Cleveland Skeptics, Cleveland Freethinkers, CFI Northeast, Durton Freethought, Cincinnati Skeptics, the Humanist community of Central Ohio, and many other humanist free thought groups in the state. I can say that Ohio has a growing humanist community thanks to what you've been doing over the years, promoting ethical and reasonable secular worldviews through education, community service, outreach, activism, and social events. Friends, today there is a growing threat of religious fundamentalism in many parts of the globe. Worldly organizations driven by otherworldly agenda are on the rampage. They are waging holy wars, killing, maiming, kidnapping, raping in furtherance of their destructive and divine visions of this world. The forces of dark age are trying to push back the tide of enlightenment and intellectual awakening on many fronts. No incident has brought this fanatical rage closer to the minds and memories of Americans more than the September 11 attacks. This attack by Islamic militants was an awakening experience. It changed the face of America. It changed the discourse of Islam, of religion here in the US. Following the attack of September 11, a debate started in the US and in many parts of Europe. A debate on Islam and the West. Not on Islam and Christianity, not on the Middle East and the West, but a debate on how to improve the relationship between the religion of Islam and parts of the world where millions of people profess and practice this faith. I mean, what kind of debate is that? Instead of focusing on how to tackle the global Islamist agenda, Resources have been expended rebranding the acts of Islamic terrorists and framing the violence of September 11 and similar acts of bigotry in London, Madrid, as a clash of civilization. A clash of civilization? Due to this mischaracterization, capitulations, concessions have been made. Freedom of thought and expression, critical evaluation of Islamic teachings, and other values of enlightenment have been compromised. But has this concession delivered the goods of tolerance and peaceful coexistence of human beings around the globe? Has it resulted to less acts of fanaticism? Has it restrained the jihadists? Not at all. Instead, it has emboldened Muslim extremists and their theocratic allies everywhere by canonizing their acts of criminality and barbarism. Before our very eyes, Pakistan and other OIC countries sponsored a resolution at the UN seeking a global ban on defamation of religion and Islamophobia, forgetting that religions have emerged and grown by defaming one another and by replacing a set of phobia with another. They tend to forget that one of the greatest challenges we face today is how to tackle Islam-based phobia for human rights of unbelievers, human rights of women and gay people, phobia for a secular society and separation of mosque and state, phobia for free inquiry, freedom of thought and expression, including freedom to blaspheme, freedom to renounce Islam, and freedom to cartoon anybody, including the prophets. We have witnessed attempts to force on the world an international blasphemy law, a legitimization of Islam-based phobia, and criminalization of criticism of religion. Friends, OIC countries have been campaigning vigorously to get non-Muslims, including atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, to consider worthy of respect claims and teachings we do not find worthy of believing in. Unfortunately, there are people in this country, here in the US, who think that the rising wave of Islamic militancy has nothing to do with Islam. They say that it has nothing to do with indoctrination and brainwashing going on in places like Pakistan, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Mali, Nigeria, Somalia. They say that it has nothing to do with the teachings and interpretations of the Quran or the Hadith and other messages of hatred and intolerance being propagated by imams, ulemas, mullahs, sheikhs in mosques and in madrasa schools. There are some Americans who really think that the rise of Islamic fundamentalism is a reaction to America's foreign policy. America's foreign policy? And we have seen the same argument rehashed in explaining the menace of Boko Haram in Nigeria. And I want to let you know why this argument is deeply flawed. Some people have blamed the vicious attack by these militants on the marginalization of northern Nigeria over the years, the poverty in the region, the coming to power of President Goodluck Jonathan, or the neglect of the region by his government. But they have failed to point out the jihadist roots of the crisis. They have largely ignored that the violent campaign of Boko Haram is linked to the way Islamic religion has been translated and appropriated over the centuries. That the jihadist campaign of Boko Haram is not new to the history of Nigeria. It's not new to the history of Islam. It's not new to the history of the world. And unless we acknowledge and address these jihadist roots of Boko Haram recruitment, Al-Shabab's recruitment, mobilization, ideologization, a contentment of Islamic militancy is not in sight. Why do I say so? It may interest you to know that as part of the English lessons in primary schools, Nigerian pupils are expected to read a text on a jihadist character called Gandoki. I read this text when I was in primary school, and many generations of Nigerian kids have read it. This text is actually meant to inspire children. The text glorifies jihadist Islam and religious violence. The main character, Gandoki, told children who came to listen to him and learn from him how he waged war against unbelievers. That is, those who do not profess Islam. Gandoki gave an ultimatum to unbelievers. If you follow Islam, I will set you free. If you do not follow Islam, I will cut off your heads. Friends, as part of the questions, the pupils are asked, what did Gandoki say would happen to them if they did not follow Islam? And the pupils are expected to answer, he would cut off their heads. Gandoki went on to narrate how he killed those who did not pray to God. That is the God of Islam. Friends, what has this to do with America's foreign policy? After reading these stories in schools, some of these pupils go to Quranic learning centers where they memorize similar verses that sanctify religious violence and bloodletting. My question is this: what kind of morals do we expect these children to imbibe when they are exposed to these hurtful messages at a very tender age? How can persons whose minds are poisoned with stories like this, like that of Gandoki, grow up to be tolerant of unbelievers, of other people with religious or non-religious views? Some years ago, humanists in Nigeria campaigned for the removal of these texts, but our petitions to the publishers and policymakers fell on deaf ears. So jihadist Islam predates Nigeria's independence. A famous Islamic figure in Nigeria is called Sheikh Usman Dan Fodio. Usman Dan Fodio is highly respected among Muslims in the country. Many of them regard him as a role model. In fact, one of Nigeria's universities is named after him. Dan Fodio was a Muslim teacher, preacher, and jihadist who lived in the Hausa state of Gobir. He fell out with local authorities, including his former student, who later became the ruler of Gobir, Yunfa, due to his reformist views and opposition to the violations of Sharia law. He was forced into exile, and from exile, he launched a jihad. Does that sound familiar? Does it sound like something which Prophet Muhammad once did? Friends, the Fodio jihadists overran Gobir and killed the ruler Yunfa. The jihad swept across parts of what constitutes the present-day northern Nigeria, and it led to the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate with Dan Fodio's son, Mohammed Bello, as the first sultan or caliph. So at independence, Nigeria inherited a northern region dominated by political Islam and an unfinished jihad. Nigeria inherited a political Islam characterized by competing views of the polity and of Sharia law. While some Muslim clerics have communicated their so-called reformist ideas and opposition through preaching only, others, like Usman Dan Fodio, have at a point taken up arms against un-Islamic governments and authorities or anyone opposed to their preachings in order to press home their demands for an Islamic state or a stricter enforcement of Sharia law. And one of such preachers was Muhammad Marwa. Muhammad Marwa was the founder of the Militants sect. Like Don Fodio, Marwa was a self-acclaimed mujahid, an Islamic reformer. He built some followership through his preaching and later launched a jihad in the 80s against the local state authorities in northern Nigeria. The armed struggle led to the death of over 4,000 people. Jihadist Islam in Nigeria has found expression not only in the reformist movements, as they call them, but also in the violent protests and reactions by Muslim militants to any event or program which they consider a violation of Sharia law, or which they regard as incompatible with the notion of Islamic State, including the staging of a world pageant contest. Hundreds of people died in the violent protests staged by Muslims against the visit of an American evangelist, Reinhard Bonnke, to Kano in 1991. Excuse me. Many Nigerians were killed when Muslim militants protested the staging of the Miss World beauty contest. Muslim fanatics beheaded a Christian Igbo trader, Gideon Akaluka, in 1994. They severed the head while he was in police custody, spiked and paraded it on the streets of Kano. Friends, I want to ask you, what has this to do with America's foreign policy? A similar fate befell a Christian female teacher in 2007. Muslim students chanting Allahu Akbar lynched their own teacher for allegedly desecrating the Quran. And my question again is this: what has this to do with America's foreign policy? Shortly after Nigeria's return to civil democratic rule in 1999, Islamic theocrats imposed Sharia law on the Muslim majority states in defiance of the nation's constitution. The governor that introduced that law for the first time said that he did that, in order to fulfill an election promise. In other words, when he was campaigning, he told them, if you elect me as the governor of this state, I will impose Sharia law, I will implement Sharia law. They elected him, and of course, he introduced Sharia law. What has that to do with America's foreign policy? Opposition to the process of implementing Sharia law sparked violent clashes between Christians and Muslims in northern Nigeria. Thousands of Nigerians lost their lives to Sharia riots, and the cycle of violence orchestrated by state and non-state jihadist groups. Those who perpetrated that violence were later rewarded because they made up what we have in Nigeria today as a Sharia police. So they legitimized the jihadists and they called them Sharia police. But there are some Islamic preachers, clerics, who were not satisfied with the way Sharia was being enforced. And one of them was Muhammad Yusuf. Yusuf used his preaching to build followership of Boko Haram. He rallied people against Western education. And in 2009, Yusuf was killed in police custody, and his group took up arms against the state in furtherance of their campaign to impose a stricter regime of Sharia and establish an Islamic state. Through its local support and international network, the group has launched several attacks, raids, suicide bombing, killings, kidnappings in many parts of northern Nigeria, including the capital, Abuja. French forces halted the move by Islamists to overrun the country of Mali and turn it into an Islamic state. Islamic militant group Al-Shabab is waging similar campaigns in East Africa. The Islamic State of Sudan sentenced a Christian woman to death for apostasy in what is clearly a case of state-sponsored jihad against the human rights of women and gender equality. What has that to do with America's foreign policy? A family member came out in the case of Sudan and openly supported the execution of their own sister on the ground that it was a way for the family members to avoid incurring the wrath of Allah. Sudan has made it clear that there is no freedom of religion in the country thanks to the Sharia law that is in force in the country. Profession of Islam is not by choice, but by force of paternity, not maternity. That means if the father of a Muslim, if one's father is a Muslim, then the person is a Muslim. Like in the case of Miriam Ibrahim, the father is a Muslim, the mother is a Christian, and they said, yes, she's a Muslim. She cannot convert. If she converts, it's apostasy. She has to be killed. So one cannot change one's religion. Anybody that does so is an apostate. An apostasy is a crime punishable by death. So friends, a new dark age looms in Africa and in many parts of the globe. The forces of jihad, theocracy, nihilistic ideologies, religious tyranny are holding many societies hostage. Should we stand by and allow those drunk with religious fantasies to destroy the world? Or should we instead take proactive measures to combat and counteract the schemes of those deluded by their belief in an afterlife in paradise? Friends, the world looks up to the humanist community of Central Ohio for leadership in this culture war against the forces of religious extremism and superstition. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, freethinkers need to muster the Promethean courage and help bring the light of reason once again to humanity. Very often, when we talk about enlightenment, we talk about the past. We make constant reference, to the Enlightenment, Western Enlightenment. We have talked so much about the enlightenment of the past. What about the enlightenment of today? What are we doing? So we need to muster the courage and campaign to achieve a new enlightenment for the world. Humanists, atheists, agnostics, skeptics, freethinkers need to rise up to the challenge of loosening the grip of religious dogma on the minds of people. The grip of religious dogma on the morality, law, education, politics, and human rights of people across the world. The world in general. People in Africa, in Asia, even here in the United States, they look up to us. The world beckons on us. Thank you.